Hi, I'm Paris, and a week ago I really changed up my diet to try to cut down on the amount of oxalates that I'm consuming. I read that oxalates can cause some symptoms that I've been having: frequent urination, difficulty sleeping, arthritis-y type, aches in the joints. Now, I do have other things going on medically that could cause some of those side effects, but if it could be the oxalates doing it and I can cut those out and improve those symptoms, I'd really like to do that. So I decided to experiment on myself to cut out the worst offenders, the foods that I eat pretty much daily, but it turns out they're very high in oxalates. And now after 1 week, I wanted to give an update on how I'm doing. Well, after a week with my oxalate consumption cut, I think about 75 to 80% down from where it used to be. I would say I'm pretty much the same. Now, two things did happen after I changed up my diet, and could they be oxalate related? It's possible. One thing, a little bit odd, I don't usually these days get much in the way of the sand you get in the corner of your eyes, especially after sleeping. I remember as a kid having that a lot more often. You scratch there and there's some little gritty thing. Well, for the first few days after changing up my diet to be low oxalate, I noticed I was having that kind of grit in the corner of my eyes. Now, was it an oxalate crystal thing coming out? Was it because we had some especially dusty air for a few days outside? I don't know where it came from, but I did note that that happened. It stopped after about 4 days. I'm not noticing it anymore. And for the first few days, starting the very first day I made the big changes to my diet, I had some indigestion, some acid stomach, a little bit of reflux kind of feeling in the evenings. And that went again for about 3 or 4 days. And I don't seem to be experiencing that anymore. Now, I don't remember that being oxalate related. Makes more sense to me that that's dietary change related because I'm eating some different foods, caused a little bit of intestinal upset at my microbiome. And the urinary frequency, no change. And sleeping, how well am I sleeping at night? Has that improved? I sure don't feel like it. Let's check the Fitbit results and see. We can look at the week before I started that and then this past week, see how those numbers compare. Here in my Fitbit app, you can see last night's sleep, 5 hours and 19 minutes. Okay, but that's just one night. Let's go back. Full week of my low oxalate diet, and I averaged 5 hours and 35 minutes of sleep. So, let's look at the week before I made the change to my diet. 6 hours and 24 minutes. I was doing even better before changing to low oxalate. Though you can see that one with the star, the almost 7 hours and 30 minutes. That's really an outlier. I don't usually get that much sleep. Boy, that was a nice night. Let's go back one more week just to see here. Yeah, 5 hours, 22 minutes. And again, one really good night and the rest were all pretty mediocre. Go back another week. 6 hours and 3 minutes. So there we go. 5.5 to 6 hours a night is pretty typical. And when we look back at the week since I made the change, still right in there, 5 hours, 35 minutes. So no improvement. And joint aches and pains, yeah, still got them. Maybe a little bit different feeling, I'm not sure. The whole thing with the oxalate, from what I've read, is if you're eating foods that are high in oxalate, your body has trouble excreting them, they can build up and you get little crystally things in your joints that cause the pain. So you stop eating it, you should stop irritating your joints and causing that problem. But then there's this whole idea of your body has to, once you really lower your oxalate levels, is your body has to then detoxify itself and it has to get all that out. So since the oxalates can accumulate in different organs, when your body no longer has this super high load going in, then the idea is it goes and it lets the organs flush those things out. So you can actually have oxalate, high oxalate consumption type symptoms by lowering your oxalate consumption and then having your body try to flush the oxalates out. At least that's what I've read, but it sort of seems like a very hard way to know of whether you're doing a good job or not, because it hurts when you eat lots of oxalates and then it hurts when you stop eating lots of oxalates. And they say it can go on for months or even years as your body cleans all that stuff out. As I mentioned in my video a week ago when I started this, and after having read up on it somewhat and gotten partway through that book, well, I finished that book that made me think I should give this a try. And yeah, I was less impressed as the book went on. I saw less evidence and more just repeating the same mantra. I also saw the author making some other medical statements that I think are kind of iffy, but you kind of associate more with the conspiracy type camp. So that made me a little bit more dubious about all this as well. But I've stuck with it for this full week. And I've done some more online research trying to understand why I wasn't having more of an effect from the oxalates over these years, if they really were doing something to me. And a few things I found. One is dogs get kidney stones, usually calcium oxalate kidney stones. Now, dogs tend to eat a lot of meat and meat products, and that's not where you find the oxalates. The high level of oxalates are in fruit and vegetables. So why is it fairly common that dogs get these kidney stones from oxalates if they're not consuming the oxalate foods? And it would stand to reason that vegetarians and vegans should have a lot more kidney stones than people who focus more on eating meat, but they don't. In fact, one of the risk factors for kidney stones is a high meat diet, from what I've read. So that doesn't make sense either. And I came up with a theory why I may not have been having the issues from eating the high oxalate diet, though some other people do. And there is a type of bacteria that lives in the gut of some people that breaks down oxalates. And if the oxalates get broken down, well, then they don't get absorbed into your system. They don't have to get flushed out through the kidneys. And so even if you're eating lots of them, you manage to bypass those issues because, as I've found, with whatever it is that I eat a lot of, I seem to get a lot of bacteria in my microbiome that digest and break those foods down, which makes a lot of sense. So it's not too much of a stretch to think if one of the components of the foods that I'm eating is oxalate, I would probably have quite a few oxalate digesting bacteria in me because there's all this oxalate there to be digested. In the book that I read, they mention people who have other gastrointestinal issues seem to have more trouble with the oxalates causing problems. And that makes sense because if you have a messed up microbiome, then it may not be responding appropriately to what you're eating. So even though you're eating a high oxalate diet, you're not developing a pool of bacteria that's sufficient to digest that oxalate. And so you end up with it getting into your system and causing the oxalate problems, the kidney stones, and the other issues. If I don't see any further improvements in my health or worsening, basically if I don't see any changes, I may end this diet experiment in about a week. If not, if I do see something good going on, if I see something bad going on, I probably won't stick with it. But if there suddenly becomes an improvement, maybe I'll stick it out for a month. Either way, I'll let you know how it all turns out, and I'll see you on the next review.
There are so many choices and you don't want to stress. You want your health food at home, receiving only the best. That's what we're here for, we give honest reviews. parristx.